Hello everyone, my name is Rohit Hunt and I work as a Principal Solutions Architect at Dynamic Management Solutions, Vancouver, Canada. I'm an AWS Certified Cloud Practitioner and an AWS Certified Solutions Architect Associate. I primarily design solutions for cloud or kind of a multi-cloud or hybrid cloud for different organizations in Canada. In this video, we are going to talk about Azure Data Studio. It's one of the new tools by Microsoft for data professionals. So let's get some hands-on with the Data Studio from Microsoft. Before we can really start working with that, we need to really download it and install it on our local system. So if you have like a Google browser or a Chrome browser with you, you can search for Azure Data Studio, and one of the first links that you'll get is primarily for the download of the Azure Data Studio. But before that, you can just click on the Azure Data Studio Microsoft main page, which primarily gives you some more insight about Azure Data Studio. So Azure Data Studio is a cross-platform database tool for data professionals using the Microsoft family on-premises and cloud platforms on Windows, Mac OS, and Linux. Some people normally ask why to use Azure Data Studio if we have SQL Server Management Studio. Azure Data Studio is more like a modern editor with the IntelliSense code snippets, and it provides the capabilities of source control integration and an integrated terminal. The terminal can be either like a choice of yours, whether you want to go in for PowerShell or another kind of a bash shell or whatever you want. And in fact, the Azure Data Studio also supports notebooks, which is like different queries you save, your results are being saved, and you provide different integrated dashboards and charts for your result sets. So if you are going to use our Data Studio, which runs on Mac OS and Linux, probably Azure Data Studio is one of the things you would like to go in for. And if you are connecting on to a big data cluster like SQL Server 2019 or Azure Data Lakes or Azure Data Environment, so probably Azure Data Studio is the way to go forward. On the other hand, you can also see a feature comparison with SQL Server Management Studio. SQL Server Management Studio is more like kind of performing DBA activities and kind of a wizards where you can take backups, restorations, like create databases through some wizards, or have DAC installations of the database objects into any SQL Server environment. So this video primarily focuses on the Azure Data Studio. If you see on the left hand side below the Azure Data Studio's main page, you have an install feature. So you can download the Azure Data Studio for Windows, Mac OS, and Linux environment. So whatever environment, it is an open source cross-platform, so you don't have to worry, like it can only be run on Windows. So you can download it. It's a kind of a system installer or a zip file or a user installer, like if you just want to click on and go by a wizard process. So once you click this, the installation would start happening on your local PC. It is around like 100 MB. The version, this is the latest version 1.17.1, but it may be different once you are actually seeing this video at that point of time. It takes a little bit of a while, so we can stop this and forward by the magic of this video. Our Azure Data Studio has been downloaded. Then we can just run the setup by double clicking it. So you can see it's like a very straightforward kind of a setup where you just have to accept the few license agreements, click on next. Then it is gonna ask you some kind of additional stuff like whether it needs to create a desktop icon or not. register Azure Data Studio as an editor for supported file types, and add path to the Windows system path settings. So once you click on next, it's just going to do the installation with the required settings that we have selected. So once again, we'll come back once it is fully installed and start working with that. Thank you. Once the Data Studio is installed, we can search it from the Windows Start menu by Azure Data Studio, and you'll find an icon for the same Azure Data Studio app. Click on that to start with that app. This app would load with the first welcome screen, where you have the different options of deployment, or creating new connections, new query, or new notebook. The first thing what we want to visit before creating a new connection is like the left hand sidebar, which is like different options. You can even create connection from this connection icon. You can search for different things in Azure Data Studio from this search icon. We can directly create notebooks or start working with the notebooks by clicking on this one. I will cover this notebook just like within this video. Also, we have an explorer that gives you a list of all the files that you are currently working. Write me a stored procedure that's saved, or a stored function trigger, or a notebook. And this one is primarily your integration with your source control to any kind of a repository, whether it is a Visual Studio Team Foundation server or a Git repository. And this one is for the extensions, which can help you to gain more out of your Azure Data Studio. The extensions can be simply like choosing color combinations, or themes, or connectors connecting to Hadoop, or anything, or code snippets extensions. This is just like based upon the Visual Studio Code feature. So the first thing what we can do is let's start creating a connection over here, so that we can connect on to any SQL server. You can connect on to Azure SQL Server, or a local Microsoft SQL Server. Let's say I'm connecting to a local host. I have a SQL Server 2019 installation on my PC, so I can use a local host installation, and I'm going to use a Windows authentication for connecting onto that SQL Server. You need to specify a database, which would be like, once you connect your Azure Data Studio, which database should be by default connected. Let's choose a database. It's if you see, it's giving you a list of all the databases over here. So let's connect to that, and if we want to give any connection to the this SQL Server connection string, we can give it let's say SQL Server localhost, and then we just simply say connect. So if it all goes fine, primarily you would have a full-fledged working connection, where it automatically gives you a list of all the tables over here, some basic information about your database. You can refresh that. You can have a backup, you can have a new query, you can have a new notebook. Let's try creating a notebook. So we go on to the notebooks, and we simply say file and say new notebook. So once the notebook is created for you, primarily you can have two things. One is the code and one is the text. And the another thing which we have to really understand is what kind of a kernel language, like the language by which it would be interpreted, whether we are going to use some SQL, or Python, or PowerShell, or a Scala language. So we can shift between those environments. For simplicity purposes, I'm just assuming that you guys know a little bit of a SQL, and we can use the SQL kernel or the query language to work with this. Let's click on a code and start typing something. So we say, if you see, when I start typing, it's automatically giving me the IntelliSense feature. So from dbo.test dpt, there's a table called as test dpt in my lovely database. So now you can just run this from this particular icon over here. and it would automatically ask you to select the connection string, whichever connection string we want, and we can connect it. So the moment it is connected, so it automatically gives you all the rows over here, like this is some random data being pushed around over here. And the beautiful thing over here is you have small features with this data set presented to you. If you want to present it in a chart, it automatically does it for your chart purposes. Of course, you have to configure the chart to really see what kind of a series you want to build up, like on X series and a Y series. You want to go back to your let's say back to the data set. You can just click on that. It switches back to the data set. And in fact, you can also save it as an Excel, save it as a JSON, and save it as a XML, the dataset. So let's say you want to save it as a JSON. Click on that. We keep it on desktop. We say it's test JSON, and we save it. And if we open the file over here, so it by default, like you can open the file from that particular location or opens it up. It just presents you a very nice, well-formatted JSON for you that helps you to visualize the data. So that's what the default feature within the notebook is all about. So let's say you want to add up another one, so you can again add a code and add a text. So notebook is like a collection of different queries which you can save in a one notebook, just like different notes you put in on some kind of a notebook text. So I say add a code, and you can have another one. Let's say select stuff from dbo.test emp. So the IntelliSense is helping me to complete that. I can run that particular stuff, and it just gives me something like some random data what I've pushed in, and this is how you can see those things. If you want to delete any of the things, you can just use this context menu and say delete, so it would delete that. And if you want to save this notebook, so you just want to say save, and let's say we want to save it because I have tied up with one of the repositories to my Git Azure repository, so I'm going to just save it over there, Azure Data Studio, and let's say I will save it as test notebook. So once you save this, so this gets saved, and if you want to run the commands like run cells before or run cells after, so this would technically run all the cells what are there for different queries, whether you want to run all the above one, including the cell from where you are giving that particular command, and or you want to just delete that, or you want to clear the result, so you can easily do that. The another thing over here is if you go on to the terminal, you want to go on to the terminal window, so you can just go on to the view and say this terminal. So by default this terminal window would open up the same way where you have already pushed up. It is in temp Azure Data Studio, and I'm on the master branch, and if you see you have a bash shell, so you can select a default shell over here. You can add on PowerShell or some another shell. So let's say over here you see ls, so we have a test notebook which is created for you, and if we see get status, so it would show us that this particular two files have been added. So I'll say get add all the files, and then get commit added a notebook in Azure Data Studio, and then so the commit local commit is already done, and git push region master. So if you do that, so it would automatically push it to the origin master, and yeah, so it's gone into my repository, and you can see if I see the git status now, so it's on the branch master and everything is clean. So it means whether you work with the notebooks or queries or anything else, You can technically save it, do kind of Git repositories. You have a source code integration well defined. You get a terminal experience. You get the IntelliSense code over here, and you also get the visualizations of the data which you can configure on the fly. So these are all the features that are kind of best available to the a developer or any person who is like working with the BigQuery or the big databases or any kind of a databases. In the next part, I'm going to demonstrate how to exactly use stored procedure and alter it and run it, and then also push it to the Git repository. See you in a minute. Thank you. Hello, welcome guys again. The last thing which I want to cover in Azure Data Studio is to see how we can really work with the stored procedures or some basic database objects within our SQL Server. So we go on to the connections, and we already have this connection, and if we can see, we can just like click on this so that it can connect itself to the SQL Server database. Yes, it shows a green color, and then it brings on all the tables, views, synonyms, programmability, all the database objects that reside in our database. If we click on the programmability, the stored procedures, we get a list of the stored procedures that are currently available. I'll just click on this, click right mouse button on this, and say script as alter. So it would open up a new window for me, and you can see I can change the connection if I want to run this particular stuff in a different database or a different connection. And this one is some kind of a stored procedure which just like simply pass a name and it just represents it. Let's just change that. So we say set welcome to Azure Data Studio. And we just use at the rename. Okay, so now if in order to really run it back and then resave it in the database, we can just use the run over here. If everything goes fine, it would just simply say yes, all the commands completed successfully and different lines. And now if we really want to run this, we can just use a file, new query, and then we can just simply say execute dbo.rd test, and we'll say, let's say I give my name, and if I execute it, so it is also going to execute on the lovely connection database string. So once I run this, so if you see, I get the results and I get that stuff over here. So it's a kind of a like modern way of working with the databases objects, whether it's like database tables, stored procedures, functions, or anything. Because the terminal window is already open, let's see if the git status has changed. So I just want to save it because this is one of the this one was a particular SP as a file. I just want to save that, so save it, and I want to save it on rd test. If you already have a file, it's better to open that so that it automatically picks it up. But if you just want to save it and replace it, and now you say a git status again, so that particular file is modified. So let's say we do a git add and git commit, local commit, changed stored procedure to add a welcome message with name rd test. So that's what the message is all about. Yes, it's done, and I just want to push it to the repository also. So if you see, this would be pushed to my repository. It all looks good, everything looks fine. So you can see this Azure Data Studio is one of our new tools for working with the database objects, whether they are residing on on-premise SQL Server or in an Azure SQL database instance.
It is very modern, having lot many features, cross platform, open source, having a lot of extensions. And the biggest thing is it is automatically pre-configured to be set up with any kind of a repository, so that the source control is well in place. I hope you all have enjoyed this video, and I'll be back with more videos in the coming time. Thanks for watching, and do subscribe to my channel. Thank you.